Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea. James Bond is the coolest guy, part 1.
We go back to the source and evaluate Ian Fleming's best-selling book series to learn more about everybody's favorite spy.
Later, we talk about James Bond's little-known background, his canonical physical characteristics, and his taste in cars, booze, and women.
Finally, this is just part 1 of a 2-part podcast, so make sure you tune in next week to hear our takes on the Bond movies that have been and the reboot yet to come.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
I'm going to start out today's podcast with a fun fact. Buddy, you ready for a fun fact?
Hit me.
James Bond is the star of the longest-running film franchise.
I got to give that a think-see. Really the longest, because when was the first Bond? In the 60s?
1962's Dr. No.
Star Wars started in the 70s. Lord of the Rings, there's those like early animated films.
Those are like from the 80s, and we can't count those.
Those don't count.
No,
okay.
no. These are not.
Frankenstein, that's from the 30s.
That's just a movie they remake over and over again. This is a film franchise. A franchise being, there are many pictures, they all star the same character, and he goes on different adventures. Would you care to hazard a guess how much these films have pulled in from the box office?
Let's see. There's been about, 25 Bond films, something
There have
like
been
that?
27.
27. Golly. I'll say, I don't think, not adjusted for inflation.
Just give me a number.
Just give me a number. 10 billion.
Double it. 20 billion.
Wow.
The latest was No Time to Die. I spent some Amazon credits that our family had banked, and I watched it recently. And I have to say, it is all wrong. All wrong. Because I have also recently gone through several of the James Bond books. And as I was comparing the two, the main thing that jumps out at me is that No Time to Die betrays the character of who James Bond is. James Bond, at his core, is a rootless bachelor and a ruthless bastard.
Hang on.
Say that 10 times fast.
Those audience members not listening closely may have heard you muddle the T's and H's.
Okay.
Say that one more time. James Bond is a
rootless bachelor and a ruthless bastard.
Okay, and you don't like No Time to Now, from my knowledge, I only saw No Time to Die once 5 years ago or whenever it came out. I suppose you believe it betrays it in that. I think in that movie he's married and has like a kid, and it just, there's some elements that kind of betray who you believe Bond is. Is that right?
Yes, he loves a woman, truly loves a woman, other than his one wife, who we'll get to later.
Yeah.
And she has a child. And at the end of the movie, James Bond dies.
That's a no-no with
Yeah.
the franchises,
Yeah.
right? Like Dark Knight Rises did this, where they made you think Batman dies, right? But then it's just Bruce's way of getting out of being Batman. These characters who live forever, you can't kill them. No. Is that? I kind of feel that way. Do you feel that way at your core about these kind of franchise characters?
Yes. Well, in my opinion, and as he is in the books, James Bond is perpetually sort of between the ages of 35 and 42. He doesn't get older than that. He doesn't really even exist younger than that.
Right.
It's just this sort of fully formed G.I. Joe, out of the package type of character. Right. And so the big problem with No Time to Die is it deconstructs this to complete heck. It's like, James Bond, you're old now, and there's two different M's who have been in charge of the corporation, and oh, now he's working for the Americans. Like, they just kind of played a little bit too rough with the character of James Bond. And I think it was a good thing, honestly, for the 5th movie of the Daniel Craig franchise to do. They wanted to put a bow on it. It was a worthy effort, but to me, it just doesn't really work as a Bond film. Not even mentioning the fact that at 2 hours and 43 minutes, it is an absolute hog to get through. It is overstuffed. James Bond books, the book series that sold over 100 million copies by Ian Fleming, are lean, pulpy novels. They are meant to be read on vacation or on the airplane to or from vacation. They go down easy. They go down smooth. So as we kind of gear up, I think, for this next iteration of the series, I wanted to go back to the character's roots and go back to the source material. And so I mentioned that they sold over 100 million copies, Ian Fleming. They sold 30 million in his lifetime and then 60 million in the 2 years after his death.
Wow.
What do you think you would attribute that to?
Well, I suppose with many artists, this is the case. They die, and it kind of renews an interest in them and their careers. But I suppose you're going to tell me the time period in which he died perhaps was a big part of this.
Well, the movies and the books overlapped. So they sort of, I think, reinforced each other's popularity. And once people heard about this, to your point, it's like, well, I love these movies, like the Sean Connery guy. He's awesome. I wonder what inspires this character. And I think that led to a renaissance. Interestingly, these books were all written at Ian Fleming's estate in Jamaica called Goldeneye. You would have sort of thought, I think of him like being in foggy London town and writing these adventure yarns to escape his sort of humdrum gray life in London, but that was not the case.
He was what, a badass in Jamaica is what you're telling me?
Yeah, well, this was sort of the dying age of the British Empire, and Jamaica was formerly a colony of the British Empire, and that is basically what Bond is. He's the last wisps of whatever made the British Empire what it was and how it exists after World War II. So there was obviously extreme austerity that was in Britain during World War II. You're, hunkered down in bunkers as the Nazis are bombing you. It wasn't a very jolly, gay time for the Britons there. And so what Ian Fleming wanted to do was kind of introduce a new hero for this new age of Britain. We're coming out of World War II. We're in peacetime now, and this is the guy essentially keeping us safe.
And he's known for just getting boozed up and hitting on married chicks and killing people. This is the hero Britain deserved, they wanted, or a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. Bond doesn't. That was a sort of a Casino Royale touch. He isn't always exclusively towards married women, though. He doesn't like women with attachments, and he doesn't really grow too attached to them. The way that Fleming came up with this character is he's partially inspired by adventure novels sort of his youth, some people that he met, some commandos, some badasses that he met in World War II, and kind of mush those two together into Bond. And he's sort of thought to be a blunt weapon. James Bond, he's a hammer. You send in the hammer. So this is a guy I think that everybody knows the name James Bond, right? Around the world. Would you say that that's a pretty popular name?
Yeah, I mean, the movies are, like you said, $10 billion. I think they're pretty big internationally. I'm curious how they do in, like, Eastern markets. Obviously, in America and Britain, they're huge. But, yeah, everybody knows James Bond. I don't know that they find him necessarily to be a hero. I mean, you root for him by nature. The movie series is about him, and he is ostensibly the protagonist. But I think most people root for him and like him in sort of a self-aware way, where he is a very morally ambiguous figure, and yet he is undeniably captivating.
Yes. Do you know his origin story?
Well, I haven't seen as many of the older Bond films as you have, and I have not read any of the books. The most I recall is from the movie Skyfall. I know Bond is an orphan like Bruce Wayne. I believe he grows up in this, and maybe it's different in the movie than the book, but he grows up in this basically country house, Skyfall, I think, with his parents, and his parents die.
Yes.
And then he becomes an orphan. It's a little Bruce Wayne adjacent, isn't it?
Very Bruce Wayne. So this was sort of written after, kind of in the sort of the later novels. Fleming came up with a backstory for him. Again, James Bond, he did the future, the past, he exists in the present for the most part. But for those who are curious, he has a Scottish sort of corporate executive father, very wealthy, and a Swiss mother. They die in a climbing accident when James is 12. He's an orphan, occasionally raised by his aunt until he joins the Navy. He has a distinguished career that leads him to MI6, which is the CIA.
I gotta stop you.
Brits.
That's crazy. He was in the Navy. Of all the arms of or branches of the armed forces, I would not have expected Navy.
Yeah, well, that's why they kind of call him Commander Bond.
The Brits, known for their Navy, though, historically, right?
Yes.
They're always very proud of their Navy.
I'd say that's their, predominant fighting force. That was the pride of the British Empire. So yeah, distinguished career leads him to MI6. His natural killing ability grants him the rank of 007 after he kills 2 enemy agents in the field. And 007 grants him the license to
kill.
The license to
I
kill.
remember that from Casino Royale. He's there's that flashback in black and white that starts the film, and he's telling a man about another guy he killed, and he's like drowning that guy, and then he eventually kills the guy he's talking to. So you basically see Bond's first 2 kills, and then he's promoted to 007, and then we're at Casino Royale. So they handle it very deftly in Casino Royale.
Absolutely. So basically, it's like when the situation is most dire, when we've tried every other solution, every other tack, every other type of diplomacy, you send in Bond. And basically what I think of Bond as, and this was what I titled the episode, Bond is the coolest guy because he can kill any man and bed any woman.
You're right. I mean, it really is the male fantasy. I was just thinking about that. It's like, I don't think any man in civilized society wants to kill another man, but I think there is this lizard brain part of every man, and it's just biological. You want to be stronger than every man, dominate every man, and then, of course, bedding any woman is the ultimate male fantasy as well. It is the very lizard-brained, primal, what straight men want is precisely what James Bond represents. And then, hey, on top of it all, you can handle your booze pretty well.
Yeah,
you don't get red in the face or be sloppy. You know?
He's at the very, very, very top of the food chain.
Yes.
Nobody is a larger, more badass dude than James Bond. And I think part of this background that Fleming gives him makes him sort of malleable. He has this great taste in luxury items and vacation spots due to his sort of posh upbringing, but he's very unfussy and manly due to his service in the Navy. There's the tragedy that you can feel about him. He falls in love with a woman and she's killed by one of the bad guys, so we always feel for Bond in that way. We feel for him because he's an orphan, and there's this, underlying melancholy to him because he's unsatisfied with all of the things that everybody else would say that they want, and as a result, we instinctually sympathize with him even when he does things that are like, well, I don't know about that. But typically he's also put up against a guy who's worse than he is.
Yeah, I think, again, the Batman Bruce Wayne comparison is evident. I don't know that there's necessarily 2 sides to Bond like there is with Batman and Bruce Wayne, but it is true. It's like this is a morally ambiguous figure that we root for just by his association to even more evil, morally ambiguous people.
Yeah. It's like, how do you catch a bad guy? Send in somebody worse. He's can basically operate any vehicle. You put him behind the wheel of anything, he'll figure it out. Yeah. Particularly loves his Aston Martin cars, loves driving them real fast, really ripping around corners. Fleming describes him as being on the fringes of the racing circuit as a young man. So, Bond is just below a race car level driver.
He's really a Renaissance man. Navy, license to kill, fringes of the race car circuit. He can really do it all.
And he's also, of course, handsome, but not in a way that is meant to be kind of in your face. Like you wouldn't say James Bond looks like a model necessarily. It's in a way that's sort of rugged, and the phrase that comes up constantly is he has cruel good looks. Like, you know, when there's just a person who, that's a handsome looking guy, but there's something mean about his face, like the way an eagle is handsome.
Yes,
you know?
there's a sharpness, you know, a definedness to the features. I think that's very fascinating. It's also very British. Like, I think British people just tend to have very sharp, defined features. So I think that's a perfect way of describing it.
Yeah, and you can't even really like be jealous as much of him, because it's like, well, it's not like he's doing his hair perfect and trimming his eyebrows and, you know, looks maxing, as the kids would say these days. It's how he looks. The man that he was compared to by Ian Fleming was Hoagie Carmichael. Any clue who that is?
Yes, I do know who Hoagie Carmichael is. I have to quickly just recall a song. Stardust. Stardust is one of his well-known songs.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, old crooner from the early part of the 20th century.
Yes, and so in a drawing by Fleming, he has black hair and a high hairline that is slicked. And I think James Bond canonically should almost have a high hairline, because I think too robust of a full head of hair, it makes you stand out. But if you have, you know, just sort of, it's just hair. Like you wouldn't notice James Bond's hair.
Would you say a high hairline is a cruel feature?
Yes,
I think
exactly.
so, right?
Like the
Yeah.
Joker, I think, is the only other character maybe canonically with a high hairline. I can't think of any others. And then he stands about 6 feet tall, 170, which is almost precisely my measurements as well.
Yeah, that's lean. I mean, that's definitely lean. You know, for a guy who's getting into fist fights. I mean, he's a lean one. But I suppose you don't want to be too ripped. He's got to blend in. He's a spy. You can't be too jacked.
I think too, we're living in a post-World War II society, so you'd probably put him nowadays, adjusting for human evolution, probably like 6'2", 190. Like give him 2 more inches and a couple more pounds. And if I were to compare him to somebody who I think he really looks like, and you can maybe think about this too, but during the Brooklyn Nets era, when the 3 stars came, there was Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. They were famously coached by Steve Nash. And I think Steve Nash at that time, with the sort of slick combed over hair, the suits, and he has sort of cruel good looks, very sharp features. So if you're trying to picture what James Bond looks like in the abstract, just think of the brief coaching tenure of Steve Nash.
I think, though, coaching Kyrie, who didn't want to get vaccinated, Kevin Durant, who's always a malcontent, and James Harden, who always chokes in big games, is a lot more stressful and keeps you up at night a lot more than killing people and having the love of your life killed and being a killer. You know, it's a wash. For me, you know?
It might have been more of a job for Ethan Hunt, because that was Mission Impossible. Huh? All right, we'll get into more about James Bond right after this. Okay, buddy, what would you say James Bond is most famous for consuming?
Oh, martini, shaken, not stirred.
Of course, the martini that is shaken,
supposed
not
to be a
stirred.
trivia question? I mean,
Not
that
really.
Was just a slam dunk.
I was gonna say, what is James Bond most famous for, and then I felt that was too broad, and so I narrowed it overly.
That was a slam dunk.
All right, well, glad you put it away. So, James Bond's martini. You're a man who likes a martini.
Love a martini. I had some friends buy me a birthday gift. It was ingredients for a martini. That's a man who likes a martini.
That's right. However, you make a martini quite different than James Bond makes his martini.
Yes, that is correct. I prefer a gin martini with a lemon twist. I believe Bond tends to do a vodka martini, or it's a mix of gin and vodka, right?
Typically, he likes more vodka than gin, and he
Yeah.
gets it shaken, not stirred. Now, you're a guy who likes a stirred martini.
Yes.
The reason you stir a martini is because you do not want to dilute the botanicals in the gin, the subtle
Yes.
flavors.
Shaking it is going to just break up the ice and essentially leach out too much water into the drink.
Exactly right. It dilutes it, but that's important with gin. Bond likes vodka, okay? And typically with a vodka martini, you have it with olive as opposed to lemon, which complements the gin flavors better. So basically, Bond's martini breaks all of the rules of typical martinis. It's vodka instead of gin, it's shaken instead of stirred, and he uses lemon when it should be an olive. But the drink fits Bond perfectly because it is ice cold, strong, and bitter.
Well, he's a rootless bachelor and a ruthless bastard. That's what type of drink he'd want. I wonder, too, if he likes it watered down a little, because he's usually getting these drinks when he's in the line of duty as a spy, and you don't
Yes.
want to get too loaded as a spy. You want to keep your wits about you. So he maybe likes it watered down a little so he can, at least see with one eye open.
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's still pretty stiff. So when he famously orders the drink, as he does in Casino Royale, I took the snippet right after that out of the book just to give people a little flavor of what James Bond's dialogue is like. So this guy basically says to him, "Oh, that's quite a drink," and then it goes, "Bond laughed when I'm concentrating," he explained. "I never have more than one drink before dinner, but I do like that one to be large and very strong and very cold and very well made. I hate small portions of anything, particularly when they taste bad. The drink's my own invention." So he
is a cruel Brit prick, isn't he? He is a cruel
Absolutely.
Brit prick.
extremely exacting, very high standards, suffers no fools, has very little patience, but knows exactly what he wants. And I think that's part of what is so intoxicating about that scene when he orders the drink, especially in Casino Royale when it's Daniel Craig doing it. It is a man asking for exactly what he wants.
Yes, and I think that's enviable for men, and I think for a lot of women that's very attractive, right? A man who kind of takes charge, knows exactly what he wants. I think for the most part, women kind of detest when men are wishy-washy or uncertain or lazy. They kind of like a man with a plan, right?
Oh, God. If you've been on Hinge recently, that is the main theme. You can't get a woman to plan a date these days. You better come with
wrong
come with an
episode.
itinerary.
Wrong. We're doing
All right,
Bond this
sorry,
episode.
Sorry,
We're
sorry.
doing Bond.
Bond. I got on a Hinge rant. All right. Bond is also a smoker. He smokes up to 70 a day.
Oh, that is... Well, come on. These books were written in the 50s
Right.
and 60s. You think modern Bond is ripping cigs like that?
I think he's still having at least a pack.
At least-
Fleming himself apparently consumed like 80 a day, and Bonds has a specific brand of tobacco. How would you guess the nicotine content is in
I
there?
would guess strong and stiff, just like
Yeah.
those martinis.
Yeah, so Bond, he loves a cigarette. There were multiple snippets in the book where he had to be like, either undercover or hiding out or something, and there's a thought that goes through his head is, God, what I'd give for a cigarette right now, which is so funny. Like, what a weakness of this super agent, that he really can't focus on anything but wanting a cigarette.
Well, it's just the classic writer writing what they know.
Yeah.
And, part of it, too, is if you killed as many people as Bond had and had that tragic incident with your folks dying, you'd probably need to relieve some stress.
Yeah. And so he doesn't mind drinking on the job. It doesn't seem to really affect him very much. As I mentioned earlier, he is perpetually sort of between the ages of 35 and 42. Is this the perfect age for a secret agent?
I think it's the perfect age for just kind of any leading man. I feel like most great, juicy leading man roles are around that age. Batman maybe skews a little younger, but the actors that tend to play him tend to be in that range. So, yeah, I think it's just sort of what any man envisions as sort of their, like, waning days of their physical prime, height of their intellectual prime, and sharpness and wisdom kind of before the steady decline. I think that is kind of like, I think, people see their 20s as kind of their ne'er-do-well years, and then early 30s, maybe you're starting to kind of figure out, but once you're at 35, firing on all cylinders, ready to have your license to kill.
Absolutely. And speaking of that license to kill, let's go over what James Bond's missions typically involve. Because as the movies have gone on and on, we've gotten a lot of side characters, and there's other sort of stuff that Bond is getting up to, or sometimes we'll even have scenes where Bond isn't even really in them. And
that's
what are we doing? What are we doing?
If anything, every scene without Bond, they need to be talking about how Bond is out of control.
Yes.
That is the only time you should be having a non-Bond scene.
Yes.
Or a villain plotting, waiting for Bond to show up.
Precisely. So what are James Bond missions? What is the scope of these stories go? So typically Bond is either wrapping up an old mission, or he's enjoying a hard-earned vacation in an expensive tropical location.
Yeah, great way to begin a story. Most action movies begin with kind of a big set piece, Indiana Jones finishing his last mission, or James Bond finishing his last mission, Batman beating up a bad guy before he goes on to the next bad guy. It's just a great point of entry for a story.
Absolutely. So he grows restless. He gets to have his vacation, and he grows restless with a vacation. Whatever woman he's with, she's starting to grow attached to him, and that's the only surefire way to get James Bond to leave. Yeah, I thought of this line, and I wonder how you think. He throws away the love of beautiful women like the paper around ice cream cones.
Yes,
it's like, I'm done with this. I don't need that anymore. There, he gets called into his office, into the office of M, who is telling him that some foreign, extravagantly bad guy has a plot that endangers Britain's domestic security or international relations. So, as a taste of what these bad guys are up to, they're trying to steal tons of gold from Fort Knox, or they've set up a castle of death on a remote Japanese island full of poisonous plants, piranhas, and snakes. Or they're trying to launder drug money by buying up estates on tropical islands and killing owners who don't want to sell. So comically over the top, cartoonish, but real bad guys. Like, there isn't a ton of nuance to these characters. The most you could say to them is that they're very cunning or intelligent, but there isn't like, oh, well, he's doing this because of this noble reason. It's like, no, they're bad guys. They are bad.
It's also very British that they're super foreign, and them being foreign is at the forefront of it all. Brits tend to be like looking down on America, like, oh, things are so bad in America. The Americans, the racial tensions. It's like, geez, like, at least we reckon and have like conversations about race. It's like when Britain finally decides to have conversations about race, good luck with that. It's like you had Meghan Markle in your family, and everyone lost their mind and kicked her out of the country. It's like, give me a break,
Yeah. So with these bad guys, much has been tried, nothing has succeeded. His boss, M, in the books is a stern, pipe-smoking limey. Like, he's an old Navy man himself. He's seen everything twice.
So M is canonically a man because we associate it with Judi Dench's performance, but M canonically in the books is a fella.
Yes. He's sort of professorial, old school, a father figure of sorts to Bond. But Dame Judi Dench plays sort of a motherly figure, and I actually think that works really well in the films.
So well. I mean, she was the only one who went from the Pierce Brosnan franchise to the Daniel Craig one. I mean, that is pretty unreal staying power for the Dame, isn't it?
Truly. And I think what M represents is the old British Empire. Like, the person who plays M and the way that M is written in the books, like, just is exemplarily British. Like, they are Britain. They are a knight. You need to be synonymous with Great Britain if you're going to step into this role. And M, they love him, they trust him, but they're just constantly exasperated by either his gung-ho, nature, his, reluctance to be in communication when he's on one of his vacations.
This is how M feels toward Bond, is what you're saying. Okay, so clear. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then M has a secretary. Do you know the secretary's name?
Moneypenny.
Moneypenny. Moneypenny is and Bond have this sort of little tryst. They're sort of flirty, like it's sort of a sport. It's very swinging 60s free love sort of situation. So they give him his dossier, and he's off to wherever he needs to go under a flimsy cover story. Pretty much the bad guy almost always realizes that they're up against James Bond pretty quickly. Like he's a world famous secret agent, which is kind of a funny oxymoron. Typically, Bond has sort of a native liaison in these countries, a person who is from whichever country that he's from.
It's like when Anthony Bourdain would go abroad, and there was always like the translator or person with him. Sorry to interject.
No.
I'm
That's
just trying to
exactly
squeeze words in edgewise when I can. Go for it.
They show him the ropes. They're very much pragmatists. They're back scratchers. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And they help Bond begin the process of infiltrating the bad guy's organization. And often the bad guy will sometimes kind of welcome him in. And why is it, do you think, that these bad guys want to test themselves against James Bond?
Well, first of all, the liaisons often kind of betray Bond. Isn't that something that'll happen sometimes? The liaisons betray Bond, which I always think is because it's the classic as the audience member. You're like, I trusted you. We trusted you. Why do the villains welcome Bond in? That's a very good question. I mean, they know it's him, I guess. What is it?
I think it's like the Joker and like Batman. When you're really a bad guy, you want to test yourself against the very best.
Steel sharpens steel.
And they all have this ego about them that, well, James Bond might have stopped those other evil supervillains, but he ain't stopping me. And their goal is always a intricate plan to take something extremely valuable, be it wealth or lives, and they don't care how many people they kill along the way. And Bond is sent in there to sort of be police officer, prosecutor, judge, and executioner. He just gets carte blanche to, take him away.
Every man's dream.
Yes, exactly. Speaking of every man's dream, what have I yet to mention that is a classic part of every James Bond caper?
Gadgets?
Gadgets, yes. Gadgets play a smaller role in the books.
Bedding women?
That's it. The women.
There we go.
The women. Along the way, some women enter the picture. Either the woman is in league with the bad guy and has grown weary of her arrangement. The bad guy's treating her poorly. He's knocking her around. He's putting her down in front of his buddies. He's two-timing her. All of these different reasons why.
Sometimes all of the above.
Yeah. Typically all of the above. Often it's a smart gal who, I'll start going with this guy. Maybe he's not so bad. The lifestyle's nice, and she's reaching her breaking point. And then the other type of woman that you get here is another person going after the bad guy. Maybe she works for another secret service. Maybe she's off on some personal vendetta of hers. And typically they cross paths when Bond is in the process of either infiltrating or trying to kill the bad guy. They sort of step on each other's toes. There's a very charged, I don't like you, you don't like me, but we got to work together type of scene. And slowly but surely they kind of warm up to each other.
And they, and sometimes it results in steamy passion.
Pretty much every single time. The women are pretty unfailingly headstrong. They're going to do it their own way. They're tough. They can really, handle themselves in these situations. And of course, they are beautiful. And Bond and the woman, they work together to foil the bad guy, and typically their scheme puts them through the ringer. They've been through a bunch of adversity, so there's really no choice at the end but to blow off a bit of steam. Together they escape. The Bond takes her to some tropical locale. He grows restless with her. Rinse and repeat. We're back. Another bad guy that needs taken down. What do you think about that formula that I've just laid out there?
Yeah, very familiar. I mean, I've seen a couple of the Connery movies. I've seen one or two of the Brosnans. I've seen all the Craig movies. So, I've probably got, close to 10 Bond movies under my belt. And everything you're saying, I'm not exactly bowled over in surprised shock. This all is par for the course. I thought there'd be some gadget talk. Maybe we'll get to it later.
Well, I'm going to get into some of the weird things that they've scrubbed from the movies after the break. But just as a final note on this, I think this formula, you're poo-pooing it, you're calling it familiar. I call it rock solid. I call that you get a bad guy, you get a few tropical locations, you get a few good-looking gals, you get a good James Bond, you've got yourself a go picture. You've got a story that people are going to want to hear.
That's what the producers keep saying, but I mean, only like less than half of them are ever good. So I don't know, buddy. I mean, the bones are there, but once you fill in the muscle and flesh, it doesn't always come together.
See, I think we deviate from the formula is when things go wrong.
Really?
I think that's the problem. I think if you stick to that tight formula, just like the recipe for a shaken, not stirred vodka martini, it's going to do what it's supposed to do.
Don't progress things that are meant to be regressive, is what you're saying.
In a way, yes. And we'll get more into that right after the break. I promised some weird stuff from the book that I was a bit surprised to find. We have to remember that these are books written nearly 80 years ago.
God, that is staggering.
Wait,
wow.
60.
Oh, yeah, what 80 would be the 1940s.
The 40s, yeah, 60 years ago. Still.
They started in the 60s? Must have been the 50s. Was it really
50s,
the 60s?
all right, so 60 to
Split
70
the
years ago.
difference. Split the
65 years ago. So this is, long time. These are senior citizen-aged books. And one of the things that I guess you would say perhaps is a bit progressive is that James Bond, he has no compunctions at all about visiting sex workers.
Oh.
You don't see this very often in the movies, but James Bond is known to frequent a lady of the night, or in a book where he goes to Japan, there are intricate long scenes of him being entertained by geishas.
Wow. Now, that is so fascinating because you see Bond in part as the male fantasy of, boy, he could have any woman he wants whenever he wants them, right? He's so desirable, he's so handsome, he's so cool. But I wonder if he's soliciting these sex workers and geishas, I guess out of a need for a woman with no attachments. Is that sort of why he does it, or does Fleming say why Bond visits these gals?
That's it, for more of a good time. But I think we think about Bond as, he can get any woman, but really more what I noticed in the books is most of the women that James Bond gets are through circumstance. Like either a mission brings them together, typically. Either they're both going after the bad guy, or he's rescuing this woman from the bad guy, and, she's just been surrounded by this evil bad man and his goons. So James Bond, obviously, by comparison, looks pretty good. So James Bond isn't typically going out and, like, picking up chicks at the bar. I think you would think that of that as a waste of time.
I think I know why. It's because if you're in the middle of a mission and you're a spy, you're pretending you're not a spy, which to a woman would be very desirable, as you're being very guarded and secretive. Whereas if you're at a bar hitting on women and one of your go-to lines is, I'm a spy, and you're like bragging about it and not being secretive, that is very unattractive, I find. So I think he needs the cloak and dagger. He needs the shadows of mystery and, hiding the fact that he's a spy to appear more sexy.
Very much so. Speaking of sort of stuff in this realm, Ian Fleming, which he transmits to James Bond, has a bit of a fixation on spanking women.
Is that true?
Yes.
I don't remember that, Inspector.
It is not in the movies. Bond refers on more than one occasion to a feisty woman as in need of a good spanking.
That is as British as it gets, too.
Other characters have said things along the lines of, what else is a woman's behind made for?
Oh, yeah, this is regressive, right?
Yes.
I mean, you can't put this in a modern movie.
It's sort of just like weird and archaic. To me, it's kind of like misogynistic in like a Playboy Mansion sort of way.
It sounded like Fleming needed a good spanking for these.
He's
these
a bit of a naughty boy.
These ribald comments.
The other thing that Ian Fleming is somewhat obsessed with is changing James Bond's skin tone.
What do you mean, like blackface?
He puts him more or less in
Oh,
blackface.
God,
In the
wow.
book, You Only Live Twice, James Bond has to infiltrate this Japanese castle, and the native liaison, the man from Japan, his idea is to make James Bond look more Japanese.
Oh, jeez.
So they dye his skin, they cut his hair, they dye his hair. He goes to like a spa for this.
Oh my God.
So just beyond bizarre. Like you're
It's-
reading it and you're just like, huh?
I bet Fleming like wrote all this, and then he was watching TV one day, and an episode of Mission Impossible came on where they do just like
Yes.
the made up mask where you
Right.
look exactly like someone. He's like, that's what I should have done. I didn't need to send him
no.
to the Turnya Japanese spa. I just needed the mask machine. Damn.
Yeah, exactly.
God, that's
Part of it
funny,
is,
man.
about blending in and trying to fit in these different locations where, he is obviously a foreigner is the idea, but it's definitely a classic British guy's perspective to be like, well, all I'd need to do is change the color of my skin and I'd blend
Yes.
right
Just
in.
vintage
Yeah.
imperialist
Yeah.
point of view.
Like there's
Yeah.
nothing that, is central to the
No.
identity of the culture or whatever. The other thing though that he does is he uses it like to blend into like woods or at night he's known
camouflage.
camouflage.
Okay, all right.
So
Well,
sometimes,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's like there's one scene where he puts raw opium on his skin, and raw opium is black,
black, right?
and so
Oh,
he puts it on his skin. So James Bond is literally, I mean, he doesn't have the lips, but he's in blackface, and then he uses red dye in another part too. So thankfully,
to
this
be
is
like native. Is that
it
the
just he
idea,
just
or-
finds it and it's like, well, this will help me blend. It'll make my skin stand out less, essentially.
That
And he's in
is
like
just-
autumn wood, for instance.
That's crazy too, because camouflage that's not really a Navy thing.
No.
That's, I guess you learned it at MI6, but
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a writer who only knew about writing and didn't do a whole lot of research about spies. And it was
Yes.
just like, he was just kind of making this shit up, wasn't he?
He was certainly. I mean, I think there's certainly commandos. You
For sure.
you color your skin and
Rambo,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
for
but
sure, yeah.
But yeah, so a little bit of weird. I don't think there's too much. You got to say that Bond, if he's not racist, he's certainly sort of xenophobic and thinks
Yes.
Britain is best. There's
Yes.
definitely a
Oh,
British
yeah.
superiority
Oh, yeah.
inherent to
He's an
James Bond.
imperialist.
Yes.
I mean, he is going out. I mean, by the license to kill, he immediately has a superiority complex, and it just he happens to be British. I
Yes.
think he would have this superiority complex no matter what flag he was under, if born under in a different country or whatever. That's just his nature as a character.
Yeah, he's a little bit suspicious, yet also open to other cultural experiences. Like he's kind of this weird mix of, I'll try this other thing and I'll maybe even like it, but I want British best. I'm happiest with bangers and mash, fish and chips, mushy peas. That's what he really wants. But he is, this cosmopolitan, international sort. He knows what to order in Paris, for instance, like at a restaurant. He has like certain places that he likes to go and certain dishes that he likes to get at those places. So he's not like myopic in any way, but he does have this sort of very old-fashioned, to put it kindly, British sensibility about him. And there are also some fairly regrettable turns of phrase to describe former colonial subjects. The less we say about that, probably the better. But I think this is very much a product of its time and place, and it's written in this kind of, if you zoom out from it, it's written in this very authoritative, thinking it is objective voice, when really it's just a fascinating glimpse into the last gasp of the British Empire.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. I think you have to acknowledge the fact that it was written in a rather regressive time. It's written from an imperialist perspective. I think the modern movies have done a good job of kind of being self-aware and poking fun at these things. Even the movies from the 60s, some of the portrayals of gender roles, they were pretty much on the right side. They're pretty self-aware. They're pretty campy. It's not like these movies are just like outwardly bigoted or outwardly racist and there's no self-awareness, right? There's always been this, you know, like you said, it's written in the swinging 60s, right? There is this kind of free love. There's this openness. Maybe there's some cultural appropriation at times before we maybe knew any better. But yeah, it's like the James Bond movies are about fun. They're about escapism. They're not something that are, you know, you should spend 2 hours on a podcast hyper analyzing. Oh, wait a minute. But no, I think they're just made for enjoyment. I think you can plunder and go deeper and stuff, and it is fascinating. But for the most part, it should be easy breezy. Like you said, the books are easy breezy, and sometimes the movies maybe can even treat it too seriously.
Yeah, it's a somewhat silly, occasionally good time. For instance, in the Dr. No, or one of the books, they when they rob Fort Knox of all the gold, they assemble this criminal team, and one of the members that is on this criminal team, her name is Pussy Galore,
right?
And she is the head of a lesbian ring of thieves,
right? It's just it's Octopussy, and Dr. No, even. I mean, it's just so over the top, right? And it's like, just enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, watch something else.
Yeah. So the books, though, if I were to just kind of put a bow on that, they're very pulpy, they're very concise, they're to the point. Often, I feel like the movies really drag out the conclusion. Pretty much in the books, as soon as James Bond has an opportunity to kill the bad guy, he just kills him.
Wow.
Like, it doesn't really take that much time. There isn't that much back and forth. They don't tend to monologue at each other too much. I think Austin Powers actually does a very good job of capturing some of the swinging 60s. Yeah, baby. There is a bit of that in these books, which are pretty fun.
Very readable, like quick reads, you think?
Totally. I would equate them to other sort of British bestsellers, something like Arthur Conan Doyle or Agatha Christie.
Okay.
Little frills or flash, like the writer's voice is not very forward.
Yeah.
It's more about all in service to the story. There's a good amount of dry humor, very muscular in the prose, very transportative to these exotic locales. And it's pretty clear to me that Ian Fleming went on a lot of different vacations because there is this very real sense of, oh, this is what it's like to be there. The word verisimilitude, whatever that word is, however you say that, that's what it has. Verisimilitude. So I would, if I were to say, if you're curious about them, I would, with some reservations, recommend them to people. I would say pick any one. It's not like there's any big deal. I think the one that I read that was the craziest was You Only Live Twice, which is where Bond goes to the Make You Japanese spa. It is bizarre and fascinating. A couple other things that happen in that book. Bond feeds beer to Wagyu cows.
Oh, cool.
And he also trains to be a ninja.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very Bruce Wayne
Yeah.
yet again.
So I would say that where you just said awesome, that was something that I was saying many times reading the book. Just like, oh, awesome. And I think that kind of sums up what James Bond is supposed to be.
M's like location tracking him on the GPS. Bond, are you at a Wagyu cow farm? Feeding them beer.
Exactly. Well, let's go crack one, and we'll be back for part 2.
Crack a beer. We're gonna feed a Wagyu. Crack a Wagyu.
I was trying to put a bow on it. You're throwing a wrench. You're throwing sand in my gears here.
Let's have a watered down martini. How about that?
Sounds
How
good.
about
that sounds good.
And while you're at it, please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Will Slade, and we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers Podcast. Take care, buddy.
Nobody, you take care.